Governments love to speak the language of freedom. They promise growth, stability, opportunity, words that sound like prosperity. But history tells a different story. Behind the polished speeches and patriotic slogans, power has always relied on quiet financial magic, tricks designed to keep ordinary people busy, dependent, and broke. What makes it worse is how old these tricks are. They've been polished and repackaged for centuries. Each generation gets a new label: reform, recovery, stimulus. But the purpose never changes. Move wealth upward, sell the illusion of progress, and call it stability. The oldest of these tricks is also the simplest: inflation. When rulers spend beyond their means, they face a choice. They can be honest and raise taxes, which risks revolt. Or they can lie silently, reducing the value of the very money people hold. They choose the second option almost every time. Ancient Rome perfected it. In the 3rd century after Christ, emperors running short on silver for their armies began shaving purity from the denarius. Coins once nearly pure became thinly washed copper. To the naked eye, they looked the same. But inside, the empire had hollowed them out. The result came quietly, then all at once. Prices soared, savings turned to dust, wages chased an ever-fading value of money. It was taxation disguised as chemistry, theft hidden in metallurgy, and the empire pretended nothing had changed. That silent tax still exists. Today, it comes from central banks instead of Roman mints. The tools are digital, not molten metal, but the outcome is identical. Your purchasing power shrinks while the state's debts melt away. It's the same old alchemy with better branding. When Europe's Middle Ages arrived, the game evolved. Monarchs replaced emperors, but the hunger for funds remained. Wars, palaces, crusades, all demanded gold. So kings found a new trick: forced loans. They called it duty, not coercion. In England, France, and Spain, merchants and guilds received polite requests they could not refuse. "Lend to the crown," the letter said. Those who declined faced fines, confiscation, or worse. Sometimes repayment was promised, sometimes interest too. But when the money returned, it came in coins worth half their value, if it returned at all. The crown built fortresses and waged wars. The merchants lost fortunes and called it patriotism. Coercion wore the mask of loyalty. And the system thrived century after century because duty is a powerful disguise. By the 1700s, the deception became more elegant. Britain, the empire of merchants, turned finance itself into the trick. In 1694, the Bank of England was born. The official story said it would stabilize the realm. The truth was simpler. The government needed money to fight France. Wealthy investors lent the crown funds in exchange for interest backed by taxes. On paper, it looked like a partnership between government and citizen. In reality, it was a machine for transferring wealth. The rich bought bonds and earned secure income. The poor paid those interest bills through duties on salt, beer, and cloth. It was a brilliant illusion. Taxation disguised as investment. The safest bet in the world became lending to governments. And who guaranteed those returns? The workers, the farmers, the consumers. Their sweat turned into interest payments, their labor into security for the elite. For the first time, a government's debt was not a burden. It was an asset. And the men who understood that principle became the founders of modern finance. They didn't mine gold or silver. They mined trust. And that trust, once institutionalized, could be traded, borrowed, and sold, all at the people's expense. History shows this moment as a turning point. The game stopped with being about metal or coins. It became about systems, invisible, complex, and persuasive. Because when people believe a promise, you no longer need to steal. You can simply print, borrow, or legislate the value away. By the dawn of the 18th century, the blueprint was complete. Inflation as quiet taxation, loans as patriotic duty, debt as national progress. Each mechanism looked different, but everyone pointed in the same direction: upward. The irony? These schemes survive because they feel reasonable. No one sees themselves as the victim. Citizens believe they're investing in their country. Merchants believe they're participating in growth. But the money always flows the same way, from those who produce to those who control. History doesn't hide these truths, it repeats them. The only variable is how long it takes for the public to notice. And each time when the realization comes, it's already too late. The wealth has moved, the language has shifted, and the next version of the trick is already being prepared. As the 18th century faded into the 19th, the machine only grew more sophisticated. Debt had become the bloodstream of empire. Governments no longer needed to seize wealth directly. They could summon it through promises and paper. And each new war or crisis became an excuse to print more, borrow more, promise more. In the age of industry, deficit spending replaced the royal treasury. Factories, railroads, colonies, every project demanded capital. Politicians told citizens it was for jobs and progress, but the profits went to those who owned the bonds and the banks that issued them. When repayment day came, taxes rose, wages stalled, and services were cut. The rich collected interest, the rest paid it. By the 20th century, the trick had gone global. Wars made it respectable. During the Great War and again during the Second, citizens were urged to buy bonds as an act of patriotism. They were told their savings would rebuild the world. And in a sense, they did. But the wealth rebuilt flowed upward into the balance sheets of lenders and contractors. The public bought loyalty, the elite bought profit. After the guns went silent, the habits remained. Modern governments discovered that crisis was not a temporary condition. It was an instrument. Inflation became the quiet partner of policy. Instead of cutting costs, leaders could let money lose value, erasing debts in slow motion while calling it growth. Then came the grand illusion of the 20th century's later decades: social safety, pension systems, retirement funds, public insurance. All noble ideas, at least on paper. Workers contributed year after year, trusting the state to safeguard their future. But governments rarely saved that money. They spent it instantly, leaving behind nothing but promises. Each generation paid for the last, believing someone would pay for them in turn. It was a circular faith, a polite version of a Ponzi scheme in official dress. The story repeated whenever economies faltered. In the early 2000s, when banks drowned in their own greed, governments rushed to rescue them. They called it stabilization. But the rescue money came from taxpayers, not executives. Profits were private, losses became public. The institutions that caused the crash emerged even larger, their survival guaranteed by the very people they had exploited. It was the same Roman trick: steal silently, then rename the theft salvation. Central banks perfected the performance. After the crash of the 2008, they created trillions of dollars out of nothing. They called it quantitative easing, a phrase so opaque it discouraged curiosity. Markets rejoiced. Asset prices soared. Stocks, real estate, and bonds all climbed to record highs. But who owned most of those assets? Not the families struggling to pay rent, not the workers whose wages had frozen. It was the investor class, the same minority that had always benefited when money multiplied. For the rest, the magic turned toxic. Living costs rose faster than incomes. Savings lost power. Inflation, that ancient Roman tax, returned wearing a modern suit. Governments insisted it was necessary to stimulate growth, but the growth bloomed only on paper, and mostly in portfolios. Even taxation learned new disguises. Instead of raising income taxes, leaders introduced subtle levies, sales duties, fuel surcharges, hidden fees, small bites that added up to a feast. And the most efficient of them all remained inflation itself. Every time prices climbed faster than wages, citizens effectively paid a tax without a law ever being passed. They felt wealthier because the numbers on their paychecks rose. Yet what those numbers could buy kept shrinking. Regulation, too, became theater. Rules were written to protect the public, but behind the scenes, the industries being regulated wrote many of the rules themselves. Railroads in the 19th century, oil giants in the 20th, tech and finance today, each learned that it's safer to own the referee than to fight the game. Governments played along, declaring fairness while quietly carving exceptions. The people saw protection. Insiders saw profit. War finance adapted as well. The rhetoric changed, not the outcome. In the 21st century, trillions spent on conflicts in the Middle East flowed first through defense contractors and bond markets. Citizens carried patriotic slogans, investors carried steady returns, and when the wars ended, the interest payments remained, another ghost of loyalty haunting future taxpayers. Perhaps the cleverest trick of all is complexity itself. Budgets layered with jargon, tax codes thousands of pages long, financial instruments so tangled that even professionals pretend to understand them. Confusion becomes camouflage, because when people cannot follow the path of money, they cannot question where it leads. In ancient Rome, the fraud could be held in the palm of a hand, a light coin that should have been heavier. Today it hides inside spreadsheets and acronyms, invisible yet heavier than ever. And still the pattern holds. Inflation eats away at savings. Debt grows larger each year. Bailouts wait on standby like fire extinguishers for the markets. Central banks manipulate currency with quiet precision. Every cost flows downward, every benefit upward, and the majority, unaware of the pattern, continues to call it progress. The truth is harsh but simple. Most people never escape these tricks because they don't see them. They mistake policy for fate, inflation for growth, and regulation for protection. They work harder, earn more, and somehow end up with less. Ignorance becomes the most profitable commodity of all, and governments, like empires before them, trade in it endlessly. But there is an antidote: knowledge. Financial education is resistance. Economic history is armor. Because when you understand the game, you stop playing by its illusions. So when the next stimulus is announced, ask who profits first. When prices rise, remember it's not an accident. It's policy. When new regulations appear, look for the fingerprints on the pen. Real freedom begins the moment you start seeing the pattern. If this changed how you see the system, hit subscribe. History still whispers the same lesson. The trick only works when you stop paying attention.